Hello, I'm Ellery Dorn. My parents canceled my wedding with a single sentence, said it was a waste of money. What they didn't say, that the money was already gone. Used to fund my sister's luxury wedding. They threw her a ballroom celebration with my trust fund and didn't invite me, not even a seat at the back. No explanation, no apology, just silence, like I was never meant to be part of the family in the first place. But I didn't yell. I gathered the proof. And a week later, they got a court summons with my name on it. What happens when the quiet daughter stops playing nice? Let me show you. The lemon tart sample was still sweet on my tongue when I got home that evening. I'd spent the afternoon with the caterer finalizing small details, dessert pairings, wine list, vegetarian swaps. I was humming to myself, shoes kicked off at the door, veil catalog in one hand, keys in the other. The scent of gardenias, Thane's weekly gift, still lingered by the window. I remember thinking, we're almost there. That feeling didn't last long. I opened my laptop to check for a confirmation email. My inbox glowed quietly in the dim kitchen. One subject line stopped me cold. Regarding your wedding plans. It was from my father. I clicked, "We've decided not to fund your wedding. It's a waste of money." No greeting. No explanation, just that, a single sentence carved with the precision of a scalpel. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misread it. I blinked, reread it. The cursor blinked back at me, cold and indifferent. Before I could process, another email slid into my inbox, this time from my mother. "We hope you understand. Focus on your future, not fairy tales." There were no capital letters, not even a love, Mom, just blank space and condescension. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a moment. My hand was still clutching the lemon tart flyer. The edges curled where my fingers dug in. My heart didn't race. It slowed, like my body instinctively knew to shut down before it overloaded. They didn't call. They didn't ask. They didn't even pretend it was a conversation. They canceled my wedding like it was a gym subscription they forgot they had. I sat there, the kitchen light humming faintly above me. Outside, the late spring breeze moved through the trees, but inside, everything was still. I picked up my phone and texted my mother. "Can we talk?" The message showed delivered, never read. I called my father. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What was there to say? Finally, I typed a single sentence to Thane. They canceled it. He replied instantly, "I'm coming over." I placed the phone face down on the counter and stared at the ceiling. There were no tears, just this aching space inside me growing wider by the second. 2 days later, I was scrolling through my phone, mostly out of habit, not curiosity. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even my cousin Dana, who'd already ordered a bridesmaid dress. I didn't know how to explain something I hadn't fully grasped myself. That's when I saw it. Seraphine's post. "Big things are coming. Save the date." There was a ring emoji, diamonds, a full glam shot of her in white, seated on a marble staircase, and the caption, "The Laughtons are hosting something unforgettable for their golden girl." Golden girl. That's what they always called her. Ever since we were little, she got the spotlight, the stage, the photo ops. I got applause from the side of the room, the supportive younger sister role, never the lead. I clicked the link in her bio, a full wedding website, venue, the Grove Room, 5-star, waitlist only, catering, top-tier local chef, guest list, extensive, family from all over, friends, business partners, former classmates. My name wasn't there, not even a placeholder. There was a registry, though, a fancy one. I didn't message her. I didn't call. I just kept staring at my screen until it dimmed. Then I looked up at the ceiling and let the silence stretch out like a blanket over my body. I remember asking myself, was I always this disposable? My memory offered an answer, an old conversation years ago. I was 16, showing Dad my sketchbook of design ideas. I wanted to study interior design, not accounting. He flipped through the pages, expression unreadable. Then he handed it back and said, "Your sister shines. You, support." That line settled into my bones and stayed there. Maybe that's why I never fought for the spotlight. Maybe I thought if I just kept being useful, they'd eventually see me. I was wrong. That night, I opened my wedding planning spreadsheet, the one I'd poured 6 months into, pages of vendor notes, meal counts, floral arrangements. I scrolled through it slowly, deleting rows one by one. Venue, deleted. Guest list, deleted. Floral budget, deleted. I saved the cake tab for last. Thane liked lemon tart, said it reminded him of our first real date. Finally, I reached the last cell. Mom's seating. I paused, then I hit delete. So be it, I whispered into the stillness. 3 days passed like a fogged mirror. Nothing clear, just fragments of sound and motion. The house smelled like stale coffee and unopened mail. I kept my laptop shut, as if silence could stop the ache from spreading. On the third morning, just as I was pulling on my cardigan to leave for work, I heard the faint slide of paper under my door. It wasn't a bill or an advertisement. It was a white envelope, heavy, expensive, the kind printed on the kind of paper people save for celebrations. My name was written across the front in gold ink. My heart tightened. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I knelt down and picked it up. Inside was a pristine wedding invitation. Seraphine's name gleamed in bold cursive. The venue, the Grove Room, the date, next month. I ran my fingers over the embossed lettering, wondering why it had arrived this way, quietly slipped under my door instead of mailed like everyone else's. At first, I thought it was some kind of apology. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe this was her way of reaching out. But as I looked closer, something didn't fit. The envelope seal had been broken and resealed. Inside, the RSVP card was missing. So was the return envelope. I flipped the invitation over, reading the fine print. It was dated and printed weeks before my own wedding had been canceled. Before my parents' email, the timeline didn't lie. The wedding planning overlapped mine. That's when I realized this was never about money. They'd already chosen whose wedding to fund. I placed the invitation on the counter, its white paper too bright against the dull kitchen tile. A few hours later, I sat by the window with a mug of tea I didn't drink. My phone buzzed, a notification from Instagram. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Seraphine had posted a new picture. Her caption read, "Some people are guests of honor, some are just bitter shadows." The comments flooded in instantly. My aunt had replied, "You're the classiest of them all, honey." Others added hearts, praise, and emojis. It was like watching a party through glass, hearing laughter that wasn't meant for me. I didn't comment. I didn't screenshot it. I just locked my phone and stared at the reflection in the window, my face dim, faded by the afternoon light. Not even snakes bite this quietly, I thought. The longer I sat, the heavier the air felt. The invitation was still on the counter, its gold letters catching the light every time the wind moved the curtain. I picked it up again, this time reading the date carefully. It hit me like a physical blow. The wedding was scheduled on my birthday. I checked the calendar to be sure. June 12th. No mistake. That wasn't coincidence. Seraphine knew. Mom knew. Dad must have known too. She didn't just want to leave me out, I murmured aloud. She wanted the day I was born to belong to her now. The bitterness that had been simmering inside me for days thickened, not as rage, but as realization. This wasn't sudden. It was an inheritance of dismissal, passed down like old china, handled carefully, but meant to serve only one purpose. I leaned back in my chair and let memory pull me under. Seraphine, age 12, wearing a new red dress for Christmas. I was 9, wearing her hand-me-down from the year before. Clorinda had said, "You look so darling, Seraphine. That color makes your eyes sparkle." She turned to me briefly. "Ellery, maybe next year we'll get you something new." Next year never came. Then high school. Seraphine's theater awards, my art ribbons. Mom and Dad came to every one of her plays, brought flowers, clapped like she was Broadway's next discovery. When my paintings hung at the community art fair, they said, "We'll try to stop by if traffic isn't bad." They never made it, and the joke my father told every Thanksgiving. She got the brains, Seraphine got the face. Everyone laughed. I did too. I used to believe humor softened cruelty. Now I know it just makes it easier to repeat. I looked around my apartment. My sketches lined the walls, half-finished concepts for interiors I might never design. The sunlight had faded into evening by the time I stood and crossed to my desk. The invitation sat there like a wound. I opened my old wedding binder, the one I'd closed 3 nights ago, and stared at the color-coded tabs, the notes, the dreams stitched together by optimism and foolish trust. One by one, I tore the pages out. The sound was sharp, satisfying in a way that made my heart ache. I ripped until only one page remained, a pencil sketch of the dress I'd imagined wearing. I'd drawn it when I was 20, long before Thane, long before the idea of a family that didn't flinch at me. I folded the page neatly and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. On a small sticky note, I wrote, "Do not forget who you are." I pressed it down over the drawing and closed the drawer gently, as though tucking in a sleeping child. The apartment was quiet again, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint murmur of cars passing outside. I turned off the light in the kitchen and sat on the couch, staring at the faint glow of the street lamp through the blinds. There was a knock at the door. I hesitated, then opened it. Thane stood there, 2 coffees in hand, his tie loosened, his eyes searching my face for something he couldn't yet name. "Still want to go with lemon tart?" he asked softly. I exhaled, the weight of everything pressing into that one breath. "I think it's time we talk," I said. Thane didn't sit down right away. He walked in slowly, like he wasn't sure if I wanted company or space. When he set the coffee cups on the kitchen table, I noticed how quiet everything felt. It wasn't the silence that comes from being alone, it was the kind that settles in when too many words are waiting to be said. I nodded toward the chair across from me, and he took it. We didn't touch our drinks at first. I told him everything, about the email, the invitation slipped under my door, the date that wasn't a coincidence. I talked in flat tones, like I was reading someone else's story out loud. But when I got to the part about the Instagram post, my voice cracked a little, not from pain, from anger I'd been too polite to show. He didn't interrupt, not once. He just sat there, elbows on the table, hands folded like a pastor in the middle of a prayer. When I finished, he asked one question. "Do you still want this wedding?" I took a breath, then looked him straight in the eye. "I want you. But I'm not marrying into a lie. Not theirs, not mine." His jaw flexed a little, like he was fighting the urge to stand up and start swinging at people who weren't in the room. But all he said was, "Then let's figure out what's true." That night, after he left, I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing the apartment, flicking lights on and off, staring at emails, tabs, messages. Eventually, I pulled out a box I hadn't touched in over 2 years. The lease to Seraphine's boutique was in it. 3 years ago, when her business was falling apart and our parents said she needed just one more break, I was the one who co-signed. I dipped into my own savings, money I'd planned to use for grad school, and handed it over without thinking twice. I even helped design the shop's interior. The mural on the back wall? My concept. The gold and forest green color scheme? Mine too. And now the boutique was thriving, all thanks to a brand built with my hands but without my name. She paid me back by deleting me from her wedding. I muttered to no one. My phone buzzed the next morning. It was a message from Jenna, a friend from college I hadn't spoken to in months. "Hey, just watched your sister's wedding video on YouTube. It was gorgeous. Can't believe I didn't see you in it, though. Hope everything's okay?" The link was right there beneath the message. My thumb hovered over it for longer than I care to admit. Curiosity is a cruel thing. I clicked. The video opened with Seraphine walking down a staircase, bathed in golden light, her dress trailing behind her like a movie star's. Music swelled, applause echoed. Then came our parents, smiling like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, everyone was there, everyone but me. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just closed the video and sat still until the screen dimmed on its own. Later that evening, I called my mother. She answered after the third ring. "Ellery," she said, her voice cautious, like I was a bomb she wasn't sure how to defuse. "I saw the video," I told her, "and the invitation, and the date." There was a pause. Then, "Sweetheart, you're overreacting." Overreacting. "We didn't want to make you feel worse by including you in something you weren't emotionally ready for," she continued, as if this was some kind of act of mercy. "You're always so sensitive, Ellery. Why can't you just be happy for your sister?" I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. Then I said what I'd been holding back since the second I opened that damn email. "Because she used me, and you let her." Silence. Then the call ended. She'd hung up. Not a word of defense. No apology. Just the click of a call that had never meant to be a conversation in the first place. That was it. No more stories. No more explanations. I walked into my bedroom and opened the drawer where I'd placed the sketch of my wedding dress. I smoothed it out and placed it next to a pile of documents I'd pulled earlier. Old bank records, shared account details, screenshots of Seraphine's store tagged in posts with vendors we both once met. If they wanted to erase me, they should have used permanent ink, because I was writing myself back in, line by line. And this time, I wasn't asking for a seat at their table. I was building my own. I picked up the phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the one name I knew would understand what this was. It rang twice before she picked up. "Deidre Royce speaking." I took a deep breath. "I think I need a lawyer." The words hung in the air long after the call ended. "I think I need a lawyer." I had said it out loud, and somehow that made it real. The next morning, Asheville woke under a gray sky that looked as heavy as I felt. I sat in my car outside a brick office downtown, engine idling, rain ticking lightly against the windshield. The nameplate by the door read, "Deidre Royce, Attorney at Law." I'd passed this building dozens of times, never imagining I'd need what was inside. When I finally stepped out, the air smelled like wet pavement and blooming dogwood. Inside, the office was quiet. Oak floors, books stacked neatly, a faint hum from an old ceiling fan. Deidre looked up from her desk the moment I entered. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to hold her thoughts in place. "You're Ellery Dorn," she said, not asking but stating. I nodded. "Come in, sit down." There was no handshake, no soft small talk. Just a file folder sliding across polished wood. "Start from the beginning," she said. I told her about the emails, the canceled wedding, the hidden invitation. She didn't flinch. When I laid the binder on the table, printouts, receipts, bank statements, she adjusted her glasses and flipped through with the speed of someone who already knew what she was looking for. "You said they called it off for financial reasons," she murmured. "Yet these payments, they line up with your sister's wedding invoices." My stomach tightened. "What payments?" She pointed with her pen. $3,200 to the Grove Room, dated 6 weeks ago. $1,450 to a florist, same business tagged in your sister's posts. $740 to a dress alteration service, 2 days before her ceremony. I leaned closer. Every charge came from an account I hadn't touched in years, a joint savings Dad had opened for me when I started college. "Do you have proof you didn't authorize this?" she asked. "I didn't even know the account still existed," I said quietly. "He told me he closed it when I turned 25, Deidre made a note. "Then this isn't just mismanagement, it's misappropriation." The rain outside slowed to a drizzle. She kept turning pages until she found an old note from the bank showing my father's secondary access. Then she looked up. "There's more," she said. "I'm requesting the estate documents from your grandfather's trust." I watched her type an email, crisp and precise. Within hours, a scanned file appeared in her inbox. She opened it, scrolled once, and exhaled through her nose. "Arthur Dorn left a trust of $175,000, she read aloud. "Meant for your wedding only. Funds to be released upon marriage." My heartbeat stumbled. "He told me that when I was 16, I said softly. I thought he was joking. "It's here, black and white. Your parents have been the trustees since his passing." She turned the monitor toward me. These withdrawals, her finger moved down the page, span the last 3 years. Notes describe family home improvements and business assistance for Seraphine Lawton. That boutique of hers? Yes. Paid with your inheritance. The words sat between us, heavier than anything I'd heard all week. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. I had never cared much about money. I grew up believing decency was its own currency, but this wasn't about cash. It was about being robbed of a future someone else promised me. They didn't just erase my name from a list, I said finally. They erased me from my own future. Deidre leaned back, watching me carefully. I could tell she'd seen this kind of heartbreak before. They believed they were entitled, she said. People often are when they mistake love for ownership. Her tone was steady, practical. You have a strong case for financial fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. We'll need to subpoena the bank, gather proof of their transactions, and document every instance of exclusion. Are you ready for that? I thought of my mother's voice on the phone. You're overreacting. And my father's calm silence beside her. I thought of Seraphine's smile on camera, paid for with what was supposed to be mine. I'm ready, I said. The meeting lasted another hour. When it ended, Deidre handed me a thin folder. Keep this. We'll start with these statements. Don't contact them directly again. Let me handle communication from now on. I thanked her, though the word felt too small for what she'd given me. A way forward. Outside, the sky had cleared to a soft blue. I stood on the sidewalk holding that folder like it might vanish if I loosened my grip. People passed by, students, couples, tourists, but none of them knew that my family had taken something far more personal than money. They'd taken choice. Driving home, I rolled the window down halfway, letting the wind cool my face. Every street I passed looked the same as before, but I wasn't the same woman driving through them. When I reached my apartment, the light was dimming. I set the folder on the table and sat beside it, staring at the documents spread open like confession pages. I remembered something my grandfather said to me once at his workshop, the smell of sawdust in the air. When the time comes, he'd whispered, sliding a small wooden box into my hands. Be the Dorn who doesn't flinch. Back then, I thought he meant courage in general. Now I understood. He'd seen what control looked like in this family. He knew I'd need to be the one to break it. They didn't believe I was worth investing in, I said under my breath, so they bet on her instead. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to my mother. My fingers didn't shake. The words were short, precise, and final. You knew about the trust. You'll hear from my attorney soon. I stared at the screen, waited for the little dots that meant she was typing. Nothing came. After a while, I slipped on my coat and stepped outside. The air smelled cleaner somehow. Across the street, a family was laughing over dinner on their porch. For a second, it hurt to watch. Then it didn't. I had something stronger than comfort now. I had clarity. When I returned home, Thane was waiting by the door. He took one look at my face, at the folder in my hands, and didn't need to ask. Still, he did. Did you find what you needed? I placed the folder on the table and met his eyes. No, I said, but I know what they stole. The next morning, the sun rose sharp and clear, slicing through my blinds like a reminder that the world kept moving whether I wanted it to or not. The folder from Deidre still sat on the table, its corners worn from my grip. Thane came by around 10, 2 coffees in hand. We met at the cafe near the library, the one with chipped mugs and music soft enough to hear yourself think. He set the drinks down and reached across the table. You look like you haven't slept, he said. Didn't feel like it, I admitted. He leaned back, studying me. You know, you don't have to do this alone. I do, though, I said quietly. Because it's my family, my mess. He shook his head. No, Ellery, it's their mess. You just finally stopped cleaning it up. For the first time in days, I smiled. Small, tired, but real. He was right. I'd spent my whole life being the glue, holding everyone together while they pulled me apart. He took a sip of his coffee. If you decide to take this all the way, I'll help. Lawyer fees, statements, whatever it takes. I frowned. You don't have to. I know, he interrupted, his tone steady. but I'm offering anyway. You've been the family's quiet fixer for too long. Let them find out what happens when silence stops serving them." I looked at him for a long moment, and suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just exhausted. "You know, my dad once told me to take up accounting because design was a gamble. Said creative people always end up broke and bitter." Thane's lips twitched. "That's funny. He said the same thing when I told him I wanted to teach literature. Maybe he has a list." I laughed, soft, startled. It felt strange to laugh again, but it loosened something in me. The moment lingered until memory pulled me back, a flash from college, standing on the dorm steps, my father shouting over the phone about my decision to switch majors. The whole hallway could hear. I remember hanging up and sitting on the steps, hands trembling. Thane had found me there, silent, not asking questions. He just sat beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. "You're not broken," he'd said quietly. "You're just not bendable anymore." Even now, the words still held me upright. When we left the cafe, he walked me to my car. Before I got in, he squeezed my hand. "Don't let them talk you out of your truth again," he said. That afternoon, back at my apartment, I turned on my laptop to clear out old voicemails. One caught my eye, dated 2 years earlier. It was from Seraphine. Her voice, light and sweet, filled the room. "I don't care what Mom says. No matter what, you'll be my maid of honor." I replayed it twice. By the third time, my throat felt tight. She hadn't just excluded me. She'd made a promise she had no intention of keeping, the kind that hurts because it was never real to begin with. "She promised me a role," I whispered, then handed me a bill instead. I closed my eyes, letting that truth settle. Around 5, Thane called again. "You seen the local business blog today?" "No. Why?" "Better sit down before you do." He texted me a link. I opened it, scrolling past the headline before I even processed the words. "Young entrepreneur Seraphine Lawton shares her secret. I funded it all myself." There she was, smiling in front of her boutique, hair perfectly styled, her hand resting lightly on her husband's arm. The article gushed over her independence and self-made success. There wasn't a single mention of the lease I co-signed, the design I built, the money I gave when she couldn't pay suppliers, and then the quote, "I never needed help. I built my life with my own hands." It was like reading an obituary for the truth. I sat there in silence for a long time. Then, calmly, I picked up my phone and dialed. "Ellery?" Her voice came through bright, rehearsed, like she'd been expecting applause. "Finally decided to be the bigger person?" "No," I said, keeping my tone even. "I called because I read the article." A pause. Then, that little laugh she used when she thought she was winning. "Oh, that. You know how journalists are. They twist everything. I can't help it if people think I'm successful." "People think that because that's the story you told them." "Oh, come on," she said. "You're always so dramatic. It's not like you'd have done anything with that money anyway." That one landed like a slap. I took a slow breath. "If you keep lying about me, I'll stop being silent," I said. My voice didn't shake. "And I'll be louder than you think." "You don't have the guts," she sneered. I smiled to myself. "No," I said softly, "but I have receipts." And I hung up. For the first time since this started, I felt something like peace. It wasn't relief or victory. It was clarity. I didn't need their approval anymore. I just needed the truth to stop hiding. I opened my laptop again, found the old voice memo, forwarded it to Deidre with the subject line, Exhibit A. Then I opened a blank document and began typing out my declaration. Dates, details, everything I could remember. The tapping of the keys echoed through the apartment, steady and deliberate. Every sentence was a piece of ground I'd reclaimed. Outside, the light faded to gold, painting the walls with warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of my own breathing. They had built their stories on my silence. Now I was done whispering. The morning after I sent Deidre the file labeled Exhibit A, the world looked sharper, as if the air itself had edges. I drove to her office under a pale June sky, the kind that promised heat later. When I stepped inside, she already had the documents spread across her desk, each page marked with bright sticky notes. "You were right to keep everything," she said. "We have what we need to move forward." I sat down, folding my hands in my lap to keep them still. She adjusted her glasses and pointed to the highlighted lines. "Your grandfather's trust, $175,000 designated for your wedding. It couldn't be accessed without your signature. Yet your parents made 24 withdrawals over 3 years." My stomach turned. What did they spend it on? Deidre read from the ledger. "Renovations on the family home. $10,000 to the boutique you helped your sister start. A trip to Tuscany 2 summers ago." She looked up. "All from the same account." I stared at the page. They didn't even try to hide it. "They assumed you'd never look," she said quietly. "That's what happens when someone teaches you to be silent. They start believing silence is consent." I traced one of the signatures beside each withdrawal. My father's, neat and identical every time. "They didn't spend it behind my back," I said slowly. "They spent it in front of me, assuming I'd never notice." Deidre leaned forward. "We'll file for restitution and fraud. Once we submit, the court can freeze what's left of their assets until trial." The thought of it didn't thrill me, it just steadied me. "Do it." She nodded. "You'll need to sign a formal complaint today." As she prepared the papers, I watched dust float through the sunlight cutting across her office. My name, Ellery Dorn, appeared again and again on each page. For once, it didn't feel small. An hour later, she slid the folder toward me. "There's one more thing. You mentioned an invitation that arrived late?" I nodded. "It showed up under my door after the wedding." "Do you still have it?" "Yes." "Bring it tomorrow. It could prove deliberate exclusion." That evening, I dug through the drawer where I'd buried the envelope. The gold ink still gleamed. I flipped it over, checking the postmark. None. It had never been mailed. The next morning, I visited my old apartment building, the one I'd moved from a year ago. The manager, an older man named Cliff, still worked the desk. "Hey Cliff," I said, placing the envelope in front of him. "Do you remember anyone asking about forwarding my mail?" He rubbed his chin, thinking, "Actually, yeah. A woman and a man came by last spring, said they were family, wanted to make sure any invitations or packages got sent to your office address. Gave me a card with that written on it." My pulse thudded. "Do you still have the card?" He rummaged through a drawer and handed me a faded index card. The handwriting was my mother's. "They made sure I wouldn't get this," I murmured. Back at home, I scanned the note and added it to the growing stack of evidence. In my affidavit, I wrote, "They deliberately ensured I wouldn't receive the invitation to prevent any claim that I was excluded." When I finished, I sat back, exhausted but clear. I'd spent a lifetime avoiding conflict, smoothing edges, translating cruelty into misunderstanding. Yet conflict had always found me. It had learned the shape of my quiet. That evening, I opened a box of old letters and found one from my mother, written the week I graduated college. Her handwriting looped neatly across ivory paper. "You make us proud by not making noise." I read it twice. Then I struck a match and held the corner until it curled black. The flame licked the words away. "Then I'm done making you proud," I said softly. By Monday, Deidre and I were standing in the courthouse. The air smelled faintly of paper and coffee. My heart didn't race. It beat slow, certain. She handed me a pen. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure." I signed every page. My signature grew steadier with each stroke. Deidre smiled slightly. "Want to be there when they're served?" I shook my head. "No. Let it arrive like they did mine, unannounced." When we stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit hard, bright against the courthouse stone. I felt weight peel off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to what they did. I was directing what came next. That night, I set the signed copy on my kitchen counter beside my phone. 3 missed calls blinked on the screen, all from my mother. No voicemail. A notification lit up next. Seraphine had tagged her boutique in a new post. The caption read, "Don't believe everything you hear. Some people are just bitter." I almost laughed. I poured myself a glass of water, took a slow sip, and let the quiet stretch. This time, I whispered, I'm not deleting anything. The summons were served on a Tuesday. Deidre had warned me that once they hit the doorstep, nothing would stay quiet. She was right. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. Clorinda opened the envelope in the kitchen while pouring her afternoon coffee. She'd probably expected another thank you card from one of Seraphine's guests, some leftover praise about the centerpieces or the catered wine list. Instead, she read the header, Superior Court of Buncombe County, and dropped the mug. It shattered across the tiles. Warren was nearby. She must have called out for him, because the next part was relayed to me later by someone who shouldn't have known at all. My cousin, Rebecca. She screamed, Rebecca told me in a whisper over the phone. I mean, full-on screamed like someone had died. I guess in their world, someone had... Warren didn't yell. He never did. According to Rebecca, he just stood there, arms folded, watching Clorinda crumple in disbelief. And Seraphine? Apparently she rolled her eyes, tossed the envelope on the table, and said, she wouldn't dare. But I had. An hour later, the family group chat exploded. Aunt Linda chimed in first. What is this about Ellery suing your parents? Tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding. Clorinda replied in a way only she could. Passive, layered with guilt-tripping, wrapped in faux concern. Let's not make this worse than it already is. I'm sure we can talk this out. Families don't belong in courtrooms. I didn't respond. Then Seraphine posted on social media, a quote layered over a filtered photo of her boutique window. Real success always brings out jealous hearts. The comments came quickly. Her circle closed ranks like clockwork. So true! You're glowing, girl! Some people can't stand to see others win. I watched it unfold from my kitchen table, the lawsuit paperwork spread out in front of me like a map of war. I sipped my coffee, unmoved. I didn't need to reply. The summons had already spoken for me. That night, as I scrolled absent-mindedly through her feed again, I noticed something new. Seraphine had updated her wedding album online. I clicked through out of morbid curiosity. She had recaptioned the family section. Grateful for everyone who's truly been there. My name wasn't in the gallery, not even in the metadata of the page. She'd removed me again, on purpose. I closed the tab slowly, my jaw tight but my mind sharper than it had been in weeks. Every erasure was another point on my affidavit. Every caption, every update, admissible evidence of intent. By Friday, Deidre called me with an update. The court approved the motion to freeze assets, she said. The trust mismanagement case is solid. The house is now under review. That includes the land it's on and any improvements paid for by the trust. I sat with that information, letting it wash over me slowly. The house I grew up in, the one where I painted my first wall, cried my first heartbreak into a pillow, and stood by the window waiting for my father's car lights to flash down the drive, was now caught in the storm of their own making. They're going to lose it, I said. They might, she replied. If the audit confirms what we suspect, it'll be part of the damages. That evening, Thane met me at a little Italian place near the courthouse. It had started raining on and off, the kind that taps lightly on windows and slows down time. As we finished dinner, he reached across the table, hand warm on mine. You just made them feel powerless, for the first time in their lives. I didn't want to hurt them, I said quietly. I just wanted them to admit I mattered. He didn't respond right away, just squeezed my hand gently. Later that night, I passed by Seraphine's boutique on my way home. I wasn't trying to be seen, but she noticed me through the window. She was pacing inside, phone pressed to her ear, her face tense. We locked eyes. 2 seconds. That's all it was. I didn't stop walking. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. Back home, I kicked off my shoes and dropped my bag by the door. The apartment smelled like rosemary and rain. I was putting leftovers in the fridge when my phone buzzed. Warren. I stared at the screen, then answered. His voice was low, unsure. Ellery, we didn't know you'd take it this far. I sat down slowly. You took it that far, I said calmly. I just followed the money. There was a pause. A silence that felt bigger than both of us. He didn't hang up, but he didn't say anything either. So I ended the call myself. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed to see myself clearly. No lipstick could fix what had been broken, but today wasn't about appearances, it was about truth. And showing up for yourself, I've learned, doesn't require makeup, just resolve. Downtown Asheville buzzed with summer heat and courthouse nerves. Thane dropped me off and didn't say much. He didn't have to. His silence was steady, like a hand resting on my back without touching it. Inside the courtroom, the light was too white and the air too still. People whispered, papers rustled, shoes tapped linoleum floors. When Seraphine entered, she didn't look at me. Her lawyer walked in front of her like a shield. She wore a pale blue blazer that said, "I have it all together," but her hands wouldn't stop fidgeting with the clasp of her purse. Clorinda and Warren sat behind her. My mother wore the same pearl earrings she wore to every family photo day. Maybe she thought they'd bring luck. The judge arrived, and just like that, the hearing began. Deidre spoke first. She laid everything out with surgical clarity. Dates of unauthorized withdrawals from the trust, funds used for non-designated purposes, the overlap of wedding expenses between what should have been mine and what became Seraphine's spotlight. She showed the screenshots, the bank records, the forwarded voice memo, the invitation mailed to the wrong address, deliberately, the group texts, the social media captions, all admissible, all patterns. My name echoed through the courtroom, not in defense, not as background, but as the center. I didn't flinch once. I didn't look at them. I looked forward. When the judge asked for clarification on intent, Deidre turned calmly to the bench. "We are not here because of a disagreement between siblings. We are here because a woman was systematically excluded from her own legacy." The defense tried to spin it. There was confusion, they said, a miscommunication, family decisions made in haste. But even the judge leaned back with narrowed eyes. "You had power of attorney. You withdrew over $160,000. The trust explicitly required the beneficiary's consent. How do you define haste in 3 years?" They didn't answer that. When it ended, the judge didn't rule on damages yet. That would come later. But the freeze on assets remained. The Dorn house was now under investigation for lien fraud. The boutique's books were ordered into audit. I left the courtroom slowly. Outside, the sun was harsh, unforgiving. I didn't notice Seraphine following me until she stopped 10 feet away. Her voice cracked. "Ellery, please, don't destroy everything." I turned, finally meeting her eyes. "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "You lit the match." That night, a voicemail came from her husband. "I saw everything today. I'm filing for divorce." He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just sounded tired. "She lied to me, Ellery, about the business, about the money, and about you. I can't let our son grow up thinking that kind of manipulation is normal." The line clicked off. 2 days later, the boutique's Yelp page was flooded with 1-star reviews. Posts were pulled. Her website went dark. For 48 hours, her social media was a ghost town. Then, every photo tagged family disappeared. That same week, Clorinda showed up at my apartment. No text, no warning. Just her standing on my porch like it was a Sunday in 1998, and she was there to drop off banana bread. She held a paper bag. I didn't open the door. "Ellery," she called gently. "We didn't mean to lose you. We didn't know how to handle you." I cracked the door, just enough to look her in the eye. "No, Mom," I said. "You never tried to handle me. You tried to edit me." Her face stiffened. "That's not fair." "No," I said calmly, "but it's true." She didn't step forward. She didn't push. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I'm not here to punish you," I said, "but I'm done playing my part in your illusion." I closed the door gently, not in anger, but with finality. The next morning was my birthday. Seraphine's wedding anniversary. I didn't get any cards. I took the long drive out to Arthur's old place, where the trail wound through oaks and wildflower patches he never stopped sketching. The bench he built still sat beneath the tree, weathered but solid. I laid down flowers, Nothing fancy, just the kind he liked. I pulled out the letter he wrote me when I was 17, folded and refolded so many times the edges looked feathered. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you refuse to become. I whispered into the stillness. I kept that promise. The breeze picked up. A few petals blew free, dancing down the hill. I didn't chase them. I just watched, breathing deeply for the first time in months. Back in town, just as I was pulling into my driveway, my phone buzzed. It was Deidre. One sentence. It's done. You have full control over the trust. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. A quiet thought came to me, not bitter, not triumphant, just steady. Time to rebuild, on my terms. The air that morning smelled like cedar and new beginnings. 2 months had passed since the court ruling, and the final transfer came through the week before. I'd stared at the email from Deidre for a long moment. It's done. You have full control over the trust. Before I stood, opened my windows, and let the summer air sweep through the apartment like it was clearing out ghosts, I didn't cry, I didn't celebrate, I just felt still. With the funds finally released, I signed the lease on a small storefront tucked between a florist and a used bookstore. The windows were old and sun-warped, but the bones of the space were strong, just like I felt. I painted the walls soft white, hung sketches I'd hidden for years, and named it Second Draft. It felt right, like I was finally choosing what my life would look like, word by word, line by line. And because beginnings are never just about you, I started something else too, a scholarship fund in Arthur Dorn's name for young women entering creative fields, girls who, like me, had been told to pick something more practical. It wasn't just a tribute, it was correction, quiet and long overdue. 2 weeks later, Thane and I stood barefoot in a small garden behind an old bed and breakfast just outside Asheville. The grass was damp from morning dew. There were only 16 chairs, arranged in a wide semicircle, no aisle, no altar. We didn't want that. Just the people who had stayed, who had shown up even when things got uncomfortable. There was no photographer, no videographer, no centerpieces, just friends, fresh air, and vows said with no microphones but heard by everyone who mattered. At the back of the circle sat one empty chair with a small bouquet of wildflowers laid gently across the seat, Arthur's seat. I didn't say anything about it during the ceremony, but when I glanced at it before speaking my vows, my throat tightened. Later, when we toasted with lemonade and fresh fruit, I noticed 2 other chairs that had remained empty. Clorinda and Warren hadn't come. They weren't invited, but I had left those chairs unfilled on purpose, not as an offering, but as a reminder. I didn't save them a seat to invite them back in. I saved it to remind myself, I don't need them to fill the space anymore. After the ceremony, Thane and I walked down a gravel path hand in hand, laughter echoing behind us. He leaned toward me and whispered, "This is the only kind of rich I ever wanted." I didn't answer. I just kissed his cheek. A few days later, back at the studio, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a blank card. No words, no signature, just pressed lilac petals and silence. Clorinda's way of saying something without having to say anything. I tossed it in the drawer and didn't think about it again. Warren never called, never wrote. He stayed as quiet in the aftermath as he had been in the courtroom. The man who once controlled every cent of my life now didn't even hold enough power to speak. Seraphine's boutique closed within 6 months. I heard through someone else that she moved to Charleston. No forwarding address, no email, nothing. And honestly, I felt no need to reach out. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a gavel slam or a tearful confession. Sometimes it looks like silence from people who once made all the noise. On the last day of October, I found myself sitting alone in the studio as yellow leaves blew past the front window. I'd been sketching new ideas for the front display, something autumnal with copper tones and layered textures, when I paused. I reached for a letter I'd written weeks earlier and hadn't had the courage to finish. It was addressed to me, to the girl who used to stand in the back of the room, waiting to be invited to the front. to the one who was told she was too sensitive, too much, too difficult to explain to others. I finished it in one breath. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't too much. You were simply too real for people who only knew how to pretend. I folded it gently, placed it in a wooden box next to Arthur's last letter, and closed the lid. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Healing, it turns out, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stops whispering apologies. A week later, on a crisp fall morning, I was rearranging the window display when a small knock tapped against the glass. A little girl, maybe 10 years old, stood outside with her hands on the frame, eyes wide. She pointed at the sketch in the display, a wedding dress with a high collar, subtle lacework, and a tiny stitched message hidden in the hemline. She mouthed the words carefully. "Did you make that?" I smiled and stepped closer, the sunlight softening her shadow. "No," I said. "I made the one who did." Some people learn the hard way that silence isn't the same as weakness. This story wasn't just about a wedding, it was about erasure, inheritance, and the quiet war so many fight inside their own families. What would you have done if it were your name missing from that guest list? If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed by the very people meant to protect you, you're not alone. Let us know in the comments, because stories like these deserve to be heard. And don't forget to subscribe for more true, raw, and powerful stories just like this one.